What's up, YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Freedom in Finance. Today we're talking about the differences between Bitcoin, IBIT, and BITU. And if you watched my last episode, you probably know which one I prefer. And of course, my dog is coming to join me right now. Bentley, you want to come here? Oh, good boy. This is my dog, Bentley. He's my German Shepherd. He'll probably be joining our videos on occasion. If you saw my last video, you probably know that I have a preference over one instead of the others, and I'll go over those reasons here shortly. But let's start off with Bitcoin. The pros of Bitcoin are that it's decentralized. I know that a lot of people like to stay away from the centralized aspects of finance, and if you're investing in stocks, you're not exactly decentralized, you're still part of the bigger picture. And so I realized that a lot of people like that. Another big pro is that you can transfer it anywhere in the world, especially if you're planning on retiring elsewhere. Maybe it's really handy for you to be able to transfer those funds really quickly to anywhere in the world. That could be really handy. I know for me personally, I don't use Bitcoin and don't plan to use Bitcoin as a currency. I plan to use it as a store of value, basically almost like a savings account. And so for me, I don't need to be able to transfer funds all over the world. So having Bitcoin be available in that aspect isn't really important to me. I'm not trading with people all over the world. I'm not buying gold over in Saudi Arabia or something. And so this is not important to me. Maybe if I was planning on buying real estate abroad, that could be a good way to pay for it. But for me, like I said, not really a huge pro. And let's go over the cons. Self-custody. It's a big one. You have to buy yourself a crypto wallet, which can be a little bit difficult, especially if you're in an older generation. The Bitcoin wallet, or any wallet, has the potential for being hacked. Now, I had a cold wallet. It was an Elapal Titan, and it should be unhackable. It really should. I have no idea how it's possible, but I got hacked. I lost Ethereum, two total Ethereum, two different transactions. One went out one day, and then a day or two later, another Ethereum went out. I have no idea how they got my information. To this day, am baffled. I was told that it's a cold storage wallet. It shouldn't be able to be removed. I always had custody of the wallet itself, and somehow somebody got it. My seed phrase, I wrote it down on a piece of paper and kept in my closet. There is no way that anybody could have possibly gotten it. I didn't take any pictures of it. So I am baffled. And so I know that people say, oh, I've got a cold wallet. I don't know what happened, but it got hacked. So that's another con for me right there. And then moving on, no FDIC insurance. So if you do get hacked, it's gone. There's nothing you can do about it. It's gone forever. No FDIC insurance, no nothing. So that is kind of a deal breaker for me. And for the next one, it does not count toward margin. Now, I didn't even really think about this until, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. I was like, I moved all my cryptocurrency over to Robinhood and saw that it didn't count toward my margin at all. And I'm like, well, that's no good. So that's kind of annoying. Maybe they'll change that in the future, but for right now, it just doesn't exist. And lastly, taxes are difficult. Hopefully, some of you aren't thinking, oh, I don't pay taxes on my crypto anyway. The U.S. is starting to crack down on that, and so it's probably a good idea to start paying taxes on your stuff. And so I think tax laws are going to become more streamlined and more efficient, and people are going to be able to figure out what they're supposed to do. But for the last several years, taxes have been very difficult with cryptocurrency. So like I said, hopefully that it changes over the next few years, but right now it's tricky. All right, let's move on to IBIT. Now, IBIT, you don't get to hold Bitcoin or cryptocurrency itself. You buy it on a stock exchange. And so the pros for that is it's FDIC insured. There's no hacking. No one's going to come to your stuff. And if they do, you get all your money back up to $250,000 through FDIC insurance. To me, that's huge, especially the fact that I got hacked. I really like the idea and the peace of mind of having FDIC insurance. Next is that it tracks Bitcoin. I actually just pulled up some charts, and I'll show them to you a little bit later in the video, but it shows the comparison between Bitcoin and IBIT, and they're very close. Actually, Oddly enough, over the course of the last year, IBIT is up a few percentage compared to Bitcoin, which I'm not really sure how or why, but it actually has a higher return than Bitcoin itself. And the next big one is it counts towards margin. Now, some of you might be thinking, man, I don't use margin. It doesn't really matter to me. Well, if you don't use margin, you probably should. It's pretty amazing, especially if you're using margin to sell puts. You can make a lot of extra money with the bank's money, if you will. And Robinhood has really competitive rates as of right now. We're looking at 5.75%, depending on how much money you have in their account. It's cheap. And if you're selling puts, it doesn't actually use the money, so you're not getting charged any interest on it. And I'll make another video on that. But basically, you're not getting charged any money for using their margin, and you're making a bunch of extra money on the side. Highly recommend using margin to your benefit. And lastly, for the pros, is that it's easy for taxes. Robinhood, Charles Schwab, whoever you use is going to quickly and efficiently be able to give you your tax information. Filing tax is going to be much easier than actually trying to figure out your cryptocurrency. So let's move on to the cons. There's a small management fee for IBIT. So theoretically, over the course of 10 years, you're going to lose a little bit every single year because of the management fee. So, if you bought one full Bitcoin right now, in 10 years, it's going to still be one full Bitcoin. Whereas, over 10 years, this erodes slightly, but I mean, the value of it is going up. I think it's worth the management fee, especially with the FDIC insurance. So that's one thing to take into consideration. The other thing is you can't transfer it worldwide. It's not a currency, it's a stock. And like I said before, I'm okay with that. I'm using it as a store of value. I don't need to be able to transfer it worldwide. So, like I said, not a big deal to me. So those two cons, not much of an issue. Moving on to my last one, and possibly my favorite. Different pros and cons here, we'll talk about them. So BITU is also FDIC insured. But it's leveraged Bitcoin, which is really exciting to me. So instead of tracking Bitcoin completely, it actually does bigger swings than Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin goes up 100%, well, this is going up 120%, 150%. I actually saw the other day it was at 138%, which for the last year, which is amazing considering Bitcoin was only at 92. So we're talking about a 40% spread there. It's substantial. So it also pays 6% dividends, which, Bitcoin doesn't pay dividends. And so, I mean, it's just going to keep on snowballing over the course of several years. And so to me, that's very exciting. And it counts toward margin, just like IBIT. And it's easy for taxes, just like IBIT. So let's go over the cons of BITU. There is a small management fee, just like with IBIT. So, but you get the 6% dividends to offset any of those expenses. So that's kind of a moot point. Can't transfer it worldwide because it's not cryptocurrency, it's a stock. Like I talked about before, not really an issue. Now, possibly the biggest issue, especially if you're using margin, is that it's even more volatile than Bitcoin already is. And as I'm sure all of you know, Bitcoin is very volatile. If you can't stomach the swings of Bitcoin, you certainly can't stomach the swings of BITU. It goes really big and it dives just as big. So if you're using margin, the problem with that is you have to have enough money in your account, otherwise you could get a margin call. And so with the huge swings of BITU, it's possible you're going to get a margin call. The good news is they warn you about that. And if you're using your margin to sell puts, you can just buy to close those puts. And it might cost you a few $100s, but you're not losing thousands by selling stocks that you didn't want to sell in the first place. And so that's why I really like the idea of using margin to sell puts. All right, before I finish up today, I'm going to show you the stock tickers for each one. So you can see I've already got I've got BTC picked up for the last year, has performed 80% in the last year, which is huge. I mean, if we're talking compared to the S&P 500, looking at 7 to 10% annually, this did 80%. This is going to be a great investment for anyone. In fact, you could go over 5 years right here, 900% over 5 years. That's huge. The next two stocks that I show you, IBIT and BITU, they don't have that track record because they're ETFs that recently came out in the last year or so, and so they're not going to have that information. So we're just going to stick with the last year. You can see an 80% return, 79% return over the last year. Awesome. Moving on to IBIT, in the last year, 83.57%. Now, like I said, this is supposed to be pegged to Bitcoin. Not really sure how or why they're able to get a better return than Bitcoin, but that's awesome. So really kind of mitigates some of those management fees that you get if it does outperform. I want to say that I've seen in the past that it did slightly underperform Bitcoin, so I guess it's just going to teeter back and forth between underperformance and overperformance. So really, it's probably going to be a wash in the long run. And then moving on to BITU, my favorite. This is actually down over the last few weeks. It was at 134 for the last year, but now it's up to 115%, which this doesn't factor in the 6% dividends that you get as well. So I think the fact that it's at 115%, it's my favorite, and I am able to stomach the volatility because I'm in it for the long haul. I'm going to be keeping this for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So I think that covers everything. Let me know what your thoughts are. If there's another Bitcoin tracked stock that I'm not tracking that does even better than BITU, let me know down in the comments. I'm really curious. I'm always wanting to find the next big and best thing. I do think IBIT, for me, is a better choice than Bitcoin, just for all the reasons I explained. But anyway, thanks for watching my video. Please feel free to comment on the video below, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.